Life is hard, and there are a million voices and distractions coming in from every direction. But the voice that matters most is God's. Join us as we discuss God's Word and how that applies to our everyday lives. It's time to dive in. So, girl, listen up.
Hey guys, and welcome to Girl Listen Up, a podcast by Built Up Ministries. My name is Melissa, and my co-host here is Janae.
Hey, whether it's your first time tuning in or you've been listening before, we just want to say thank you for spending your time with us because we know you don't have to. And Melissa, for me, this is actually the second podcast I've been a part of with Built Up Ministries. And I'm super excited for this one specifically because we get to speak from and to a younger generation about just some unique and difficult situations that's been going on. So like example, COVID happened my senior year of high school. So it was tough navigating prom and graduation. And we want to speak and share in such a way we'll learn how to honor God and live out the Christian faith well.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I am really excited too as well. This is my first time on the podcast with Built Up Ministries, and have a special heart for what we're going to speak about in the content. So we're going to be trying to reach those who are kind of at the young adult age from like 17, 18 to college to your first career, and really get to speak from my role as a mentor where I get to connect with people your age as well on a day-to-day basis. What I hope you get from this podcast too is, especially if you're a mom or aunt or mentor, teacher, coach, that you really get to learn from the resources that we bring here to the podcast where you can relate to those you love, lead, or teach.
That is so true. Well, girl, listen up. Today's episode is one I've been super excited to talk about, and that is friendships. And this excites me because I think it's become increasingly hard to make friends. Melissa, why do you think that is happening?
So, I don't know. I feel like as I've gotten older that it makes it harder to find genuine friendships and relationships. And I feel like I remember just being in elementary school and like playing on the swings or going down the slide and finding somebody and be like, let's go build sandcastles together. Let's go play hide and seek. And it was just so easy. But as I've grown up, it seems harder to find those genuine relationships and genuine friendships. What about you, Janae?
Yeah, I agree. So, I also think it was easier making friends growing up when you were younger, especially for me when I played sports. That was kind of an easy in because you saw your teammates a lot, like almost basically every week, almost every day. And I actually grew up in the military, so it was hard to keep hard to keep up with all those friends like after you left because just the disconnect of distance. And I actually realized that in high school I didn't have any genuine friends, especially when I kept hearing the verbiage of like, oh, I've known so and so since second grade, and I never had that. And I didn't have any genuine friendships until college, actually.
Yeah, I feel like I relate to that too. I grew up military as well. And yeah, I remember my friends from second grade, but like it's just I don't know them because they lived in Germany at the time or like these different places. But you mentioned genuine friendships. What does it mean to have a genuine friendship?
Yeah, so thinking about, I did have friends in high school. I should preface that, but I felt like they weren't genuine in the sense that every time I hung out with them, I felt like I was just there on like the outside and like they were talking and I just didn't feel very included, or I had to like work my way of like, hey, do you guys want to hang out instead of them inviting me to things? And I feel like it wasn't a two-way street is what I'm trying to get at. Versus in college, like my friend group, we loved hanging out every single day. It was a two-way street. Like they would come to me to ask like, hey, is everything okay? And I would also go to them like, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah, I know. I feel like when I've kind of figured out what it meant to have a genuine relationship and genuine friendship with somebody, that it meant that not only were they putting in the work, and I was putting in the work. It was both of us doing it at the same time, which is really, really important. But yeah, I think that as we kind of talk about friendship, I would love to dive into what the Bible has to say about friendship. So I know Ecclesiastes, I have to remember the verse. Oh my goodness. Okay. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12, it states, two people are better off than one, for they help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Like, what do you think of that, Janae, when we read that?
That is so good. I really got stuck on the last part of like, if you fall alone, you're in real trouble. Because friends, I think, are there to help pull you up and kind of guide you on the right path. What about you?
For me, yeah, I really love that as friendships. Like, we're in this together. You're not alone, and you really get to challenge each other and build each other up. I know also in Proverbs it talks about iron sharpens iron, and that verse relates to me so much because I want to be around people who sharpen me and help me improve, and I want to do the same to them because I want us all to be the best versions of ourselves too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that verse as well. What I also look for in a genuine friendship is someone who will call you out
Mm-hmm.
when things are going wrong and like they're not afraid to.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you may not able to see what is going on unless you have an outside perspective to point that out for you.
Do you feel like you have a friend right now who does that for you right now?
Yeah, I feel like you do that as well. Like we've
Oh.
been we've been increasingly being at that spot in our relationship
Yes.
of like, hey, you can do this and kind of encourage me.
Mm.
And then I do have someone else in my life who really challenges me,
Mm.
and I will be able to come be honest with them and be vulnerable. And she asks so many questions, and I'm like, wow, like had that different
Yeah.
perspective that I may have not been able to see if she didn't ask those
Yeah.
questions.
Do you feel like having friendships like that has made you like see life differently and have better perspective?
Yeah, because again, like I said, sometimes it's hard to see what's going on unless someone else has an outside perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I just value that so much, even though in the moment I may not exactly enjoy it because it hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
But coming out of that and just looking back, I think
Mhm.
it's so good to just grow and kind of stretch you.
Yeah, I think that if I didn't have those friendships in place, then I wouldn't be able to see how I can improve and how I can be better and how can I even be a better friend or human being on this earth at this point as well too. I know at the very beginning, Janae, you talked about this two-way street thing as well too. So what does that mean? Tell me more about that. What did you think about that?
I think for friendships or any relationships, just in general, it can't just be one sided. Like, you can't have just one person putting all in the effort. And to be a good friend, to have a good friend, you actually have to be a good friend as
Yes.
well.
For sure, for sure. I know in Romans 12:16 it says, live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Tell me more about that, Janae.
I also love that part of don't think you know it all. And I kind of shared earlier of how my friend asked so many questions
Mhm.
because she can't 100% sure like know what I'm thinking unless you ask those questions. So I really appreciate that, and I love all the questions because it makes you think internally of
Yes.
like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why is this coming up? And why am I acting out in that way?
For sure, for sure. And I do think like, man, we have to be able to have a good friend. We do have to be a good friend as well. So what am I doing to ensure I'm in a good place, and what am I doing to invest in the word so I know what it looks like to be a good friend? Which brings me to I think we're gonna have a special guest coming up here shortly.
Yes, so we talked earlier about how this podcast is also for mentoring. And so we're going to bring in a special guest to just talk about their relationship or their friendships experience and to speak into that.
Awesome. Well, let's go dive in there. So, Jen, part of the reason for this podcast is for us to not only speak from where we're at, but also speak to the generations that we're trying to reach out to. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and so my question for you, Jen, is what kind of advice would you give to your younger self in regards to friendships as you've lived this life a little bit more than what Janae and I have?
Yeah, man. That's tough because little Jenny, that's what I went by, needed a lot of stuff. I think, though, with regards to friendship, the biggest thing I would want to tell my younger self is, don't miss how important it is to develop a friendship with Jesus first. When I was young, like teenager in my early 20s, I was like, what does that look like? Like, I didn't even consider it. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, wait a second, here I am, and I'm losing friendships because, like I'm gossiping, or, I'm too selfish to put that person first, or sometimes I'm like, I don't need people. I'm good on my own. Like, like all these things. And then life is not great in
Yeah.
that way. And I'm like, man, maybe there is something to leaning into the friendship of Jesus. And I wish I had known that, because once I experienced it, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I got like why it matters, because he doesn't just model
Yeah.
the importance of having relationships. That's why he had the 12, the
Mhm.
3. He even had a good relationship with the siblings in Bethany.
Mm-hmm.
But he also shows you how to be a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so, man, when I actually started to experience that for myself, I thought back then it would have been so much better. I wish I had, but here we are. So I think that's what I would want to go shake me a little bit and say, this is important. Don't dismiss it. You really
Yes.
need to know this.
I think what I love hearing you talk about is that not only are we looking for great friendships around us, but like the true important friendship is that relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that it's a model. Like he truly he tells us what it looks like to be a good friend and not a good friend, basically, and how we can find those great friendships as well
Yeah.
too, which is really good.
Well, and the thing that I would add too, and really this is kind of like, what does this look lived out, right?
Yes.
Is like when you also encounter Jesus as your friend, it actually frees you up to be a better friend. Because not only do you, learn from example, but it's like when Jesus is my first and primary friend, he fills me more, where now the expectation is off of you. So like if you aren't there for me the way that I need in that moment, I've already been filled up with my friend in Christ, where like it takes the pressure off for you to meet my expectation. Like I love my husband. He's my best friend. He's my favorite person on the earth. But I run to Jesus first in celebrating highs and grieving or processing lows. That's how I know that that matters, because then when I've worked through that and experienced that intimacy that only he can do, my husband is able to be able to minister to me and just meet my needs differently, because I've already been filled up. He's just that extra for me that I get to do life with.
That's amazing. So it's Jesus overcomes everything, where he actually fulfills everything in regards to friendship. You don't need to go out and find it from others. He ultimately can fulfill everything of that need. But now you can show up and be a better friend, because you already have fulfilled that and those unrealistic expectations you have of others.
Yeah.
Jen, my last thing I want to make sure I ask you, like, what encouragement would you give to us in my age group and Janae's age group? What encouragement would you give us as we move on with life?
Yeah, definitely. We're always better together. So again, we kind of talked about how like having that intimacy and that filling up with Jesus, but we still need people together. And you are so worth quality, so like don't settle just to have some people in your life just because you don't want to be alone. But that being said, like you have to like understand that we're better together. You need community. And so really put in the effort to connect with someone. And there's so many great ways to do that, whether it's like getting a hobby, joining a club, obviously churches, schools always offer something, but don't settle. Actually put in the work. Anything of value requires work, and we need each other. We really do.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Jen. I forgot to mention earlier, Jen's actually my personal mentor. So I just want to say thank you so much, and for speaking life into us in regard to this. So I know Janae are going to walk away with a lot of good things, and I hope our listeners do as well. So thank you again for joining us.
Happy to be here.
The time I spent with Jen was enlightening, and the advice she gave us on finding good friendships really resonated with me. I love that ultimately the friendship that mattered most was the friendship with Jesus and following his example of what it means to be a good friend. What about you, Janae? What did you get from that talk with her?
Yeah, I loved all the things that you said as well. And something else that stuck out to me was that we shouldn't settle on our friendships, and that we really want quality over quantity. And
good.
I had a season in my life where I was surrounding myself with people who didn't have the best influence, and I could see that my thought patterns changed, and I didn't really like that, so I decided to not hang out with them anymore. And I tried to make other friends as well, but I just kept finding myself alone, and it was super hard at that time. So I really had to lean into Jesus as my ultimate friend, like Jen said. And even looking back on that situation, I think that really helped me in my faith because I was still learning to make my faith my own and not really lean on other people's knowledge. So that was really special to me.
That's awesome. I think what I hear you saying is that when you took time to get to know your relationship with Jesus, it ultimately created a better friendships when you met with people. And like you said, I loved you mentioned quantity versus quality. Having the most amount of friends doesn't mean that you are in genuine relationships and genuine friendships. But when you lean on him, he will provide the way and he will bring the friendships that will honor him. But it does mean putting in the work. So taking the time in prayer, taking the time in the word, and building that relationship with Jesus is what really, really matters. Because overall, if we put in the work, if we are faithful, we're going to bear fruits in our good labors around that. So grateful to hear from Jen and really feel empowered in knowing what the next steps are to not only find great friendships, but really cultivate the relationship we have with Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so good. Well, thank you so much for listening today. Melissa and I are so grateful for you taking time to tune in and be able to connect at a deeper level and chat about the realities of what it's like being a young adult in this ever-changing world.
Be sure to check out our Instagram at Built Up Ministries or our website, builtup.org, to stay up to date on all the upcoming future podcasts, along with some other amazing content being posted weekly.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast episode. To learn more about Built Up Ministries or the Girl Listen Up podcast, head to www.builtup.org.